Hi, everyone. Uh, we've already covered it, but my name's Alex Lilic. I'm a field IT manager in Microsoft's internal IT organization, which has the very memorable name of Core Services Engineering and Operations. I had some slides, but they're probably not important. I don't know how the clicker works, so we'll live without them. I'm here today to talk about digital transformation and how Microsoft's internal IT organization is trying to transform itself in order to help the company transform. And I guess it's worth starting with a quick question as to why do we care? Why do we need to digitally transform? And you probably had this beaten into you, but the answer is simple. The disruptive technologies that are here today and that are coming down the pipe, their impact is simply too great to be ignored. If we look at the Fortune 500 companies from back in 2000, half of those don't exist today. And the last 15 plus years of disruption is going to be nothing compared to the next 15 plus. So transformation is going to happen. I guess the question that interests me and hopefully you is how an IT organization can go from being a cost or a liability in that process to leading it. The nice thing about standing here and talking about this from a Microsoft perspective is we don't need to transform, right? That's a joke for any people recording this. I mean, we're a modern company with modern products. Our Azure data centers are gleaming military operations. But if you go over in the corner and you lift up the rug underneath some of our own internal IT processes, what you find is a bit different. This is the IT that we use to support ourselves, not our customers. And there you find that we're a 40-year-old company, and some of our processes in IT looks every day of that. If you've dealt with Microsoft, you know that we've got a way to go in terms of transforming and simplifying some of our business processes. And our IT, our internal IT, has evolved alongside those. So it tends to look the same. So I guess what I'm saying is that we have the need to digitally transform just as much as the next company. And in fact, we're keen to do it even more so because we believe that in the future, the ability to agilely transform, to constantly evolve, is probably the only sustainable competitive advantage. So even if we didn't have any baggage under the rug, we would be all in on this. The slide, which I'm not going to show you, was really looking at the things that we're doing to try and do this. And there's a governance approach, and then there's actually a practical list of things that we've done. And I'm going to share a little bit of both. If we look at governance, I guess an analogy would be that IT these days is in the wheelhouse, you know, the bridge on the ship. Everyone understands that IT is a strategic differentiator. Every company is a software company these days. It's just that not every company knows that. But many IT organizations, we're standing there, but we're basically reacting on orders. The sales and marketing, wherever you all are, organization will come to us and give us, tell us how they want to engage their customers. And the IT organization will go away and automate that and come back and give it to the business. And when we work like that, we're being a service provider. And I mean, that's an important thing. But in the context of digital transformation, being a service provider means you're following the business. So think of the Tour de France, that car that drives along with the roof rack and all the bicycles on top. That's the problem. You got a great view of the race if you're the support vehicle, but you're not actually in the race. So obviously the preferential alternative is to try and lead that transformation. And that's actually pretty simple. You just, as an IT organization, need to put your hands on the wheel. There's a catch, there's always a catch. And the catch is that if you're going to put your hands on the wheel, it means that you have to consciously and deliberately navigate. And that's the single key cultural change which our new CDO is driving throughout Microsoft's internal IT organization. And we call that being vision-led. And we do that with things we call North Stars, which are aspirational objectives that are over the horizon. It's a 3 to 5 year time frame. We support that with other constructs. We call them epics and stories. But together it creates a framework that we use to influence and guide a lot of the day-to-day operational decisions that we make so that we're always tracking towards these aspirational, transformational objectives. The second thing that helps with that is our new CDO happens to have come from a product development organization. And we like to joke that he sees dogs, small babies, trees, they're all products. The funny thing is that there's actually quite a benefit in that perspective. When you start trying to transition from a service or support-oriented organization to a product strategy organization, you start looking at all the activities that you are engaged in as products. And when you think of them as products, you have to have a vision for the product. You have to have a roadmap for the product. So you start going to the business and you start saying, this is the product that we think will solve your problems. Do you agree? And it's a very different discussion to if you go there as a service provider and say, what would you like? The other benefit you get when you start looking at what you're doing as a product is you start getting agile thinking. You start thinking, how can I deliver smaller increments of value with shorter sprints in a more continuous delivery model? Hopefully you also start thinking beyond service level metrics. You start thinking, what digital experience is this product going to deliver to the end user? And you start to put the end user in, or the business in center focus. And you start measuring those digital experiences. So all of this, of course, is really powerful. The thing underneath all this, though, is that when I talk about products, I'm not talking about code. It could be code that you've written internally for some application or a third-party solution you're binding together. But we have a phrase, the process is the product. Anything that we do, we see as a product. So we have a process called the launch process, which we use to support the business from an IT perspective through the 400 plus launches that the business does annually. And that process is a product. So we look at that with the same agile thinking, the value measurement, etc. So I guess our CDO might not be too crazy when, you know, dogs and small babies and everything's a product. There's a third piece which I'm going to talk about less, which is organizational. A reorg is not the answer, but we happen to have reorged. It's allowed us to align underneath our new CDO. And there are benefits there I won't go into. Maybe the one I'll mention is funding. We've moved from being discretely funded by different business units to being centrally funded, which just means that instead of sales and marketing coming to us with some money and telling us what features they'd like, and HR coming to us with some other money and asking us to build something over here, we get one bucket of money, we sit down with those stakeholders, and we jointly, with IT leading it, decide what the prioritization of those investments will be. And when we have those discussions, we do them in the context of those North Stars, that framework I mentioned with those aspirational, digital transformational objectives. We have the luxury of doing that, to be honest, only because Satya has told the company that this is a key initiative. And so we have what the Americans call air cover, a very American phrase, but we have that support from our highest management. So that's something that you may not all be able to benefit from. So that's the governance approach. That's all great. But if you keep doing the same thing you did yesterday, tomorrow, nothing actually changes. So the other part of this is that you have to actually start to produce and deliver different products. And that means you have to fully embrace these disruptive technologies that are here today and actually exploit them. There's a number of ways that we're doing that. We've been doing that for years. Luckily, there's too many for me to talk about, and I don't know enough to talk about lots of them. There's a few of them that are very relevant for my role as a field IT manager, and I'll cover some of those. The first is the cloud. We have really fully embraced the cloud. So 95% of our business processes are now run in Azure. If I think about my users in Sweden, Skype for Business, or Teams, Outlook, all of that's coming from the public cloud now. It's not on-prem, it's not even private. I think about our SAP instance, which is one of the largest SAP instances in the world, and that's in Azure now. The impact of this is, there's two that come to my mind. One is that if I walk into the server room in Akalla, it's empty. It was never huge with only 700 users, but we had infrastructure. Now there's not a single server. There's no domain controllers, there's no SCCM infrastructure, no telephony gateways. There's just a couple of switches and a router. And it makes my job absurdly easy. We're going to be relocating from Akalla to Stockholm next year, the Microsoft office, and I'm going to spend about 5 minutes planning the computer room move, which is fantastic. But the real value, of course, is that the business is actually getting all of this agile value now as we've moved those services into the cloud. Initially just as infrastructure as a service, you know, putting VMs in there, later on transforming them into PaaS or microservices. So the business now gets services that are incrementally delivered with value, no more big bang rollouts, constant delivery. That's where the real win has been. If I look at our internet, our network infrastructure, that also mirrors this development. Previously, the internal intranet was the largest or the main security boundary we had. Most traffic was internal. If you went to the internet, you jumped across an internal MPLS network and popped out through a firewall in London. These days, 70% of our traffic goes straight to the public cloud. So if we're deploying a new office these days, we just put in a great big internet link and we leave our users sitting on that just like they were in an internet cafe. This, of course, drives a different security approach. So we now talk about 3 legs of a table. We have identity, we have device health or management, and we have telemetry. But again, when we try to evolve and address each of those security areas, we're using cloud-based technologies to do it, because that's the only way to do it in this new paradigm. If we think about the internal experience that our users have when they contact the help desk, this is also something that's close to my role. More and more, we're deploying bots and artificial intelligence in order to try and expedite that experience, to speed it up, to broaden it and deepen it. And there's many more areas that I could cover that I know less about because they touch my role indirectly. But they include smart buildings, modern meeting experiences, new ways of working. So we have a large number of streams that we're driving in parallel. The key thing here, though, is that you have to fully embrace these technologies and execute them. You have to exploit them. You have to start getting out there and using them. Because only when they're in place do you begin to unlock these successive transformational possibilities. So if I go back to the question that this talk was about, which is how you go from being a cost center to leading digital transformation, I'd say that it's being vision-led, adopt a product mindset, go home and look at your dog and think about what your dog's roadmap looks like. You should think about the user and place the user in the center with each digital experience that product is going to produce. But then you should execute the crap out of it using the current disruptive technologies. So you need to actually go and deploy this stuff and start to do IT differently than you did yesterday. The thing with all of this is that it's not a quick job. It's not a transition. There isn't a start and an end date. It's an ongoing transformational process. And so the important thing is who's managing that process, how it's being conducted, and who's leading it. And hopefully, if we do our job right, we, the IT professionals, the answer to that last question will be you. Thank you. Any questions?